Hello subscribers. I'm going to do a little bit different of a stream tonight. I'm going to stream some of my Fortaeverse RPG updates and probably show off some of the examples and code too to explain how some things would work. Hopefully I'll have some people stumble across this and join in the chat, but we'll see. It's not like I have that many followers, so chances are not that likely that I'll get too much chat participation. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look here. So I was creating a new party just real quickly. I've added some skills too, but we're going to go ahead and just make, I think, 5 party members right now. Let's make one more caster. Let's do a Beacon wizard. Bump his wizardry up. I'm not going to spend time on all the other skills yet because some of them aren't really implemented. Okay, so now we're going to continue. Alright, so right now I have a knight, and the knights come equipped with some bronze equipment. So I'm going to equip the longsword and the short sword, and just to kind of show you the detection that's built in now, as you go to equip something, it knows how many hands or body parts that requires, and if you equip something that uses the same position, it'll actually unequip the old equipment. For example, right now in my primary hand I have the long sword, secondary hand short sword. So now I'm going to equip the kite shield, which also is held in a hand. So that's going to automatically unequip the short sword, which was in the secondary hand. And then the cuirass here is, you know, for chest and back protection. So I don't have anything else using that right now. And Kusas here are for upper legs. So again, that doesn't unequip anything else. Greaves are for lower legs. And then Salarites for the feet. I have armor pretty much implemented now. And I'm going to demonstrate that by stepping through the code, showing you kind of the formulas that are used right now, which I'm sure I'm going to add more to it and make it a little more complicated, but I've got it in pretty good shape. So I also have a monk here that can do unarmed attacks, and he currently has a skill of 20, which that's not great. I mean, that's pretty much the default that a monk starts with. So he can have limited unarmed attack ability with that, and I'll demonstrate that. Let's see, a kineticist I wanted to do because they can do a fire spell called Flame Arrow, and unlike most RPGs, armor will have an impact on certain spells, but it depends on the damage type of the spell, and it depends on the type of armor. So I'll talk about that in a little bit too. Okay, so that's enough of that. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take one step here just so I can have all my party members situated. And now what I'm going to do is have my knight attack. Well, no, let's have the monk attack my knight, because my knight has armor equipped. So as we can see, it's going to be an unarmed attack against Daryl. So I said okay, and right now it hit my code, so let me flip over to the code. Alright, there we go. And I'm going to step through this so you can see how this is going to execute and see some of the formulas. So there's two types of attacks basically that can happen. You either have a weapon equipped or you don't. And then there's all kinds of weapon types. But in this case, he has no weapon equipped. So it's going to execute an unarmed attack. So as we step in here, it finds if the party member has an unarmed attack skill, which monks do. So that's going to give him a big bonus here. And the base hit for punches is 20%. And that's assuming, no dodge or anything like that for the enemy. So 20% is the base chance to hit. Since I do have the 20 on unarmed attack, that's going to bump this up. So what it does is right now it takes your unarmed attack and divides by 2.5. And also changes your base hit to 25 instead of 20. Because you at least have some unarmed skill. So this base hit chance for this monk is 33% instead of a default of 20. Now the number of attacks that you get being unarmed is your unarmed attack skill divided by 20. So plus you get 1 by default. So I just barely got enough to get a second attack here. So my monk's going to get 2 attacks. So the most attacks a monk can get if you go up to 100 unarmed attack would be 6 within a round. So, the amount of damage they can do, that's not a huge amount, especially if you're attacking an armored person, but that's quite a bit of attacks. So now what we're going to do is loop through each attack, and what it does is it finds the type of technique that's going to be used randomly, and it depends on your skill level. So the random number generated here was a 46. So what it does is it takes my unarmed attack skill and it subtracts that number, and if the number falls within a certain range, you perform that type of attack. So mine is actually a negative 26, which means I'm going to punch, which that's the weakest level type of unarmed attack. So then what it does is it calculates the damage, which is between 1 and 4. And this is without strength bonus. I don't have strength bonus built in yet, but that will be added. And it does 1 to 4 crush damage, because there's 3 damage types for physical weapons: crush, cut, and pierce. So we got our 3 damage that's ready to be executed, but we got 1 more attack, remember. So now again it calculates the technique, and what's it end up being this time? Minus 63. That's even worse. So again it defaults back to punches, and the damage is 3 again, just randomly coincidence. So now it's going to execute those, but before it does so, it finds the target member and to see if they have any shields equipped. So let's step into that code. So it grabs the party member's items, and it actually... Did I unequip that shield? I'm going to have to check that out. No, there it is. Okay, I hadn't pulled them from the database yet. Okay, so it pulled the knight's items, and then what it's going to do is calculate and see if he has a shield equipped. So I'm going to put a breakpoint down here and just jump into that code. Sure enough, he has a shield equipped. So it gets the shield type. And I just looked over and you can't see any of these pop-ups, I realized. Let me see if I can... Yeah, it's going to be too hard to do. That's too bad that you can't see the pop-ups. Well, anyway, let's step through here. And then we're going to step out. Okay, so we have a shield here. Let me actually just add over here. On the right side, you're going to be able to see the values in here. I'm going to pull this over. So right here we have shields, and there's one of them. And if we look at the shield type, there's different values associated. So this kite shield that the knight has can the minimum crush damage it can absorb randomly is 0, and the max it can absorb is 30. So 0 to 30% chance. That's assuming you actually get your block in and you block the attack, which we haven't calculated yet. So shields have a good chance of absorbing or deflecting a lot of damage. So let me flip back once again. Alright, so we then calculate your effective agility, speed, dexterity, and some other attributes. And those will be affected based on things like conditions on your party members, the items equipped, all kinds of stuff like that. Then what we're going to do is calculate the dodging, effective dodging level for the party member we're trying to attack. So first it grabs the dodging skill to see if you have it. This knight does not have dodging skill, so he gets no bonus there. So then what it does is it looks at his agility, and it takes that and divides by 5. So he has 50 agility because of his armor. His armor has lowered his agility. So effectively right now he has a dodge of 10. Then it looks at dexterity, and dexterity has a lesser impact on your dodge. It's divided by 10. So that bumped his dodge to 18. Then it does speed. Now he's at 22.5. And then it does perception. So based on all of his attributes, he has a dodge of 30.5. And that's kind of like a percentage right now. Alright, let's see here. So then it grabs the equipped armor. And armor you have equipped could potentially have an impact on your dodge and actually lower it. So remember, he had 30.5. It's down to only 15.5 now. Minus 4.5. So he's actually much more likely to hit. Minus 19.5. Minus 24.5. He has no conditions. Conditions could impact that too. Like, obviously, if you're paralyzed or asleep, your dodge is going to be set to minus 50 automatically. But there can be other things too, like if you're slowed and things of that nature. So his dodge ends up being minus 24.5 because he has some kind of heavy bronze armor on. Okay, so then there's also effective parrying. And parrying is your ability to essentially ward off an attack. It's different than dodging because it can actually damage the shield or the weapon or whatever you're using to parry. He didn't have parrying skill or anything to use parrying, so it came back 0. So now we're getting to the point where we're actually going to execute the chances to hit here. So let's scroll down and find out what the base hit chance is. So based on that target's dodge and based on the initial hit chance we had, our monk has a 57% chance to hit per attack. And you can't see that, I just realized when I hover over, so let me come over here and show you. See right there, 57%. So now we add in the attacker's attribute bonuses. And it ends up totaling, once we put his in, 107%. You can see it over here. So this monk is guaranteed to hit the target. There's just no way he's going to miss because it's a 107% chance after all modifiers. So we hit. We're going to set up some messages that are going to appear in the player's queues. The way this works is all events that happen in the game generate messages. Obviously, it's text to display to the users and the players. And if your party member is either one of the attackers or one of the receivers of damage or attacks or whatever, you will be notified with a message. And that's what populates on the view to tell you what happens. So that's what's happening here. So then it grabs crush damage. We have 3. This type of attack does no cut damage and no pierce damage. So then what it does is it looks at your race and it figures out all the possible locations on your body that can be hit. And that can vary based on race. You know, some creatures only have a body, like a slime, for example. But of course, humanoids pretty much have 2 arms, 2 legs, you know, etc. So it calculates all those. And just to show you, the humanoid has 38 possible hit points, hit areas. It includes fingers, toes, so it's very specific. And then depending on what kind of armor you have and where it's at, it will then figure out how much damage is taken. So let's see what random location we happen to get targeted here. Oh, and it does generate the random location based on the volume of space that body part takes up. So I did a bunch of research on humanoids and humans, obviously in real life, and what volume certain body parts take up. And I put that in here. So I think like the up here it's called your thorax, and then you have your abdomen. Your thorax I think is like a 15% volume of your body, somewhere around there, 19 or 15%. Your abdomen's about the same. Your upper leg I think is like 9% each, total on 18. Fingers, you know, they're really tiny. It's like 0.01% of your body volume. So I think that's going to be really fun. It'll be very realistic. So the random location we just happen to get here is left upper arm. Okay, so his he got punched in the left upper arm. And then we're going to find the armor that is in that area. And sure enough, this knight does have armor in that area. Let me see what it is. The armor type is... That's not right. Plated cusses are actually on the leg. Let me make sure it had upper arm, random body location. Oh no, wait a minute. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. So yeah, I have in the database, I have it in the wrong position. That should be, it probably thought it was left leg, left upper leg instead of left upper arm. Because I don't think this knight actually has anything on his arms. He doesn't, because he has essentially like a breastplate. It's a cuirass on the upper body. But anyway, you'll get to see it in action now. So next, what it does, let me double check, make sure nobody's in the chat here. Okay, nobody in the chat, good. Well, not good, but it makes it easier for me. So next, what it does is checks the weapon hardness versus the armor hardness. And then it either like dulls the damage or it amplifies the damage against the armor only. So our crush damage is 3. All unarmed attacks just default to a weapon hardness of 30. It's basically saying bone is a hardness of 30. Now later I'll probably have to implement various hardness of unarmed attacks based on your race, because certain races may have, you know, more dense bones, or it could even be made out of something else. So that may go up. But we're just assuming bone now. Next, it gets this shield absorption to see how much damage this shield can absorb. So we're going to look at the knight and see what shielding skill he has. He has a shielding skill of 10%. So then what it does is checks to see if the random generated value is greater than the shield, which it is. So we failed to block because we only had a 10% chance there. And so we got a 90 for a random number. Let me show you that because you can't see the pop-up. So shield failed to block. If his shielding skill was higher, maybe he would have. So his armor absorption of the shield ends up being 0. That was a fail. Now it does the actual armor based on the random part it found there. So we're going to step into that code. So the armor hardness here is 45. So bronze has a hardness of 45 versus bone, which is 30. So that's going to increase the amount of damage that this armor can actually absorb. So it takes the armor hardness divided by that, and then the percent absorb is going to get modified based on that. And I actually need to make that a double. I just realized. Otherwise, we get a rounding error. A double is a decimal number. I'm going to show you something cool about Java just-in-time compiling here. So I just changed the code right while it's running, and when I save this, it's going to jump it back to the top. See that? Program counter reset, so now we can calculate it again. So it's... yeah, that's funny. The armor hardness got reset too. Okay. Well, anyway, it should have absorbed a little bit amplified damage. Its min is 10, its max is 40, so there's no way this punch is going to do any damage because it's only doing 3 and the minimum it absorbs is 10. Okay, so the reason why it's doing damage is because I reset the program counter. But normally, when that bone hit that bronze, it's not going to do any damage, which is cool because that's realistic. I mean, there's just no way punching someone on a breastplate is going to do any kind of damage unless you have a ridiculous amount of strength. Like if you're some kind of, I don't know what kind of, a troll could do it, or an ogre. If it punched it, it's going to get such a big strength bonus that, yeah, that could exceed the 10 damage. Okay, so then what it's going to do is damage the physical health of that target. Let's step into that code. It checks your resistances, which you might think is weird. Like, how could you resist crushing damage? But there are certain entities that can. For example, maybe a slime. You know, punching a slime, maybe that's, or hitting it with a crushing weapon, maybe that's not going to do any damage. Or skeletons, for example, they may take very minimal damage from a piercing attack. So humanoids, it's not going to impact it, but other races it could. So let's find out what happens here. It ended up doing 3 damage. Okay. So then, lower the stamina. Let me show that here. So the stamina got lowered by 0.25. It went from 80 to 79.75. And depending on the weight of the weapon, that's going to impact your stamina more. But since this is an unarmed attack, it doesn't impact your stamina much at all. Now remember, that was just one attack. Then it's going to do it again. But I'm going to skip that. I'm just going to step return here. Okay, so our attack is finished. I'm going to play it. And I'm going to flip back the view here so you can see what the browser tells. So it says, Bruce punches at Daryl. Daryl takes 3 crush damage to the left upper arm. And then he punched again, and Daryl took 3 damage again to the right upper leg. So that's an unarmed attack. Now, we'll go ahead and do a weapon type attack. And let me equip that short sword so that he has 2 weapons. Okay, so now, when I show his types of attacks you can see there's a huge list here. So what it does is it groups based on the life form you're going to attack. And I plan on having that do it based on the range. So the ones that are closer to you will appear higher up on the list. And of course, this is my own party. Normally, you're not going to attack your own party. And I'm probably not even going to show that in the list. Unless you do something special to say attack your own party. So it'd show all the enemies here. And so I'm going to attack Bubba because he's a troll and he has a lot of hit points. And I'm going to do a swing with my long sword and then a thrust with the short sword. So let's do that. And we're going to say okay. So his attack is executing. Okay, hit the break point. So now I got to flip back. Okay. This time it goes into execute armed attack. Now this has a lot more to it than the unarmed attacks. Hey, John Archer. Hey, Higher Ground Gaming. Good to see you guys. Yep, this is Java, which is very close to C#. Alright, so there's all kinds of weapon skills you can get. The first one it's showing right here is double hold, which means we're trying to find if the weapon you have equipped is two-handed. And the reason why I called it double hold is because there's going to be some races that may have 4 arms, 4 hands. And so they actually could potentially equip 2 double holds. Should be kind of interesting, but obviously this is a human, so he's only going to be able to do that once. So the first kind of high-level skill that some fighters may have, some fighting type classes, is called melee weapon. Well, this is the weapon type. Okay, so we're checking to see if this is a melee weapon, and it is. And we saw that we have 2 equipped. So now, since we know 2 are equipped, it's going to see if you have the simultaneous melee weapons skill. And let's see if our knight does. He does. And his skill level with it is 10%. So he's going to get a little bonus with attacking with both weapons because he has that skill. Once again, it calculates some of your abilities, like your effective agility, speed, dexterity, and all that. So I'm going to fly through that. Same deal, calculates your dodge, the target's dodge. Then it starts looping through all your equipped weapons. It finds a min range and a max range. So with melee weapons, essentially you have a 10-foot range for most of them. And, you know, by the time you have your arm out there and everything else and a little bit of movement, we're just assuming there's about a 10-foot max range there. So, some missile-type weapons may have a minimum range. You know, like you may not be able to use that. Or let's take like a pike, for example. You know, that's got a minimum range where you might be able to hit somebody 15 feet out, but if they get within 5 feet of you, that weapon can't even be used. So that's going to, you know, add some realism to it as well. So we checked our ranges, then once again get the equipped shields. This target's not going to have any shields because he's the troll. And then we start looping through the attack types. This first attack, if you remember, I said was going to be swinging. So with weapons, standard weapons, you can thrust, swing, lash, throw, or shoot. Those are the types of actions. It's not the damage type. That's something different. So since we're swinging, what it does is it looks to see if you have a swinging attack skill. And let's see if he does. It doesn't look like he does. So the knight does not have any swinging attack skill, but he does have melee attack, which is 20%. So he's going to get a bonus there. Then it calculates the crushing damage, piercing damage, and cutting damage that this weapon can do based on the swing attack. Now, what I really am excited about with this game is, I mentioned this before, when you use a certain type of weapon, it may do multiple damage types. Like swinging a Morning Star can do 3 types of damages. Crushing primarily, but also some piercing and cutting damage at the same time. So the game engine is going to handle that, and I can set it very specific on every weapon type. Well, the sword, of course, when you swing it, it's just going to do cutting damage here. So if we come over here and look, there we go. It's 0 crush, 0 pierce, but the cutting, a minimum of 5, maximum of 50. So that's a big range for the sword. And this is a long sword, and it's bronze. So depending on how solidly you hit the enemy, you can do more or less damage. And there's actually some weapon skills that can impact that and cause your damage range to be tighter, so that there's not such a low minimum. So we figured all that out. Let me double check chat here. Okay, no new messages there. What do we got next? Oh, then what it does is loop through all the parent item types for this item. So a longsword is actually a sword. That's its parent. So if you had another skill called sword weapons, you could get a bonus there as well. It's not as great of a bonus as the specific weapon skill. You can kind of compare it to wizardry, like Wizardry 8, for example, where you have the shooting attack, and then you have bows. This gets even more specific. If you have, let's say, a longbow, and that's what you're skilled with, then you'll get the most bonus from the longbow skill, if you can happen to have that skill. Next, it checks to see if you have a bow skill. You get a bonus there, and then it goes up to ranged weapons. So it goes all the way up the hierarchy on the types of weapons until there's none left. So let's see what else is next. So melee weapon, yep, that's what it is. And is there any others? Okay, nope, all right. We double check to see if it's a two-handed weapon. It is not. So we do not get to use the two-handed melee weapon skill. But we do get that simultaneous weapon skill bonus. Don't forget that. So it doesn't do any crushing damage. It does do cutting. So now it grabs a skill called cutting weapons. And this is where it'll affect the amount of damage you do. The others were for hitting. This is going to be for damage. And I don't have, this knight does not have cutting weapon skill, so he gets no bonus there. But essentially what that would have done is adjust the minimum damage upwards and the maximum damage upwards. And it kind of makes the range tighter so that there's not as much randomness with the damage. So now it's going to calculate the random number between 5 and 50 on the cut. And what did we get? 28. So it's going to do 28 damage unless the target has armor. And this is assuming we hit. We still haven't calculated if we hit him yet. So our base hit is 20%. We subtract the dodging of the target, which is 38%. Oh, and this is something else to mention. Lashing type weapons in the game bypass shields and parrying. You cannot parry them. And so that's a big advantage to them. A disadvantage for some of them is you wouldn't get a strength bonus when it hits. Like with a whip, the strength bonus is minimal. That's not true of flails, but it is true of like a whip. So lashing has that advantage. But he has no parrying ability, so that's not going to help. Then we calculate our bonus chance to hit based on our attributes. And then we're going to start throwing in the skill bonuses. Oh, and then based on a range increase or decrease. So with shooting or missile weapons, throwing and shooting, the farther the target is at a certain range, with right now I have it about 50% of the max range, it starts to decrease your chance to hit. So this isn't a range issue, so no change there. And then your base hit is also impacted by the weight. So the longsword weighs 3.2, so that decreases by 3.2% our base hit. And then we get our bonuses for the parent weapon skills. And let's see what our effective hit chance is. 34.085 blah blah blah. That's our chance. The random number that was generated was 65. So we missed. We just missed that attack. So then we're notified the players involved. If it's a throwing or shooting weapon, it would right now decrease the projectile count. If it's a thrown weapon, you can pick it up afterwards. So what's going to happen with that is it'll land next somewhere around the enemy, depending on if you hit them or missed. So, I mean, what's funny about that is they could potentially pick it up and throw it against you. But I haven't added that in yet. So, we missed. Lower stamina based on the weight of the weapon divided by 5. And then we're going to do the short sword attack, which I'm just going to fly through here. We're going to see if it results in a hit or a miss. And we missed with that as well, I believe. Yeah. So we'll attack until we get a hit. So let me just run that. And because I paused it so long, the game engine thinks you get another attack. So it's going to do it again. Okay, so the second time it did it, Bubba took 5 cut damage to the thorax, which is essentially your chest or your back. And then the next time he took 37 damage. Oh, and that was the piercing damage there. So the first attack was cut from the longsword, and then the second one was a stab wound from the short sword. Oh, it did all kinds of attacks because I had paused it so long. The game engine kept executing those in the back. So, yeah, he's almost dead now. 12 health out of 220 were drained there. So, that's how attacking is working in the armor. Let me flip over. Well, I just realized you couldn't see that. There we go. This is what I was talking about. You can see all these attacks because the game engine kept executing them while I had that paused. He was getting sliced and diced. Okay, let's flip back again. Spells can also, like I said before, do some damage to certain armor types. And the way that works is based on the damage type of the spell and the armor type. For example, a padded vest can absorb 5 minimum cold damage and 10 maximum cold damage. And then there's things like frost and ice. And then I'm skipping past poison, mental, and all that. It can actually even absorb some electric damage because it's a insulator. And then it can absorb a little bit of acid and base damage. And then it doesn't really absorb any fire or burn damage because they're kind of flammable. So different armor types will impact it a lot. For example, plated armor, huge bonus against physical attacks, but also electric will do bonus damage against it. So you'll actually take more damage from electric attacks if you have metal armor on and the electric attack hits that area. Some spells are going to hit the whole body, and that would be an area type spell. And the way that's going to work is, like, let's say a fireball that just kind of blows up. Your armor, each piece of armor you have will reduce the damage of the fireball spell. So if the fireball, let's say, is going to do 80 damage, each piece is going to help reduce that. So it could reduce it all the way down to 0 if you had a bunch of pieces of armor and they were all pretty good. However, if you get hit by a lightning bolt or something that strikes your whole body and you have metal armor on, you're pretty much guaranteed to be dead because it would just amplify by each piece. And then there's other spells that are targeted for one area, just like a flame dart or maybe a, I don't know, mind blast hits the brain, so that'll bypass armor. But anything that hits one specific spot and it's not an area spell will only be impacted just like a regular weapon attack. And then the other thing I'm going to put into the game, which again it's going to handle automatically, is your height. So like a dwarf attacking an ogre, he's not going to be able to hit the head or the upper body area unless he had a really long weapon. Most of his attacks will be focused downward, so I'm actually going to skew the random hit areas to increase lower toward the ground. And so I'm just trying to make this as realistic as possible. I think it's going to be super fun that way because it'll make it so variable that people can just spend months trying to specialize and target things and using all kinds of strategy. But I just wanted to give a little explanation of how some of the attacks and things of that nature is working and how it is actually working right now. And stamina conditions. So I've got a lot of the base game engine working for that kind of stuff. Yeah, as Higher Ground Gaming said, it's all about the math, and that's true. Making it realistic, yet, fun and fantasy oriented at the same time. That's one thing that I love doing, is marrying those two worlds. Because there's no reason why you can't have physics work most of the time, but then of course throw in magic and some other things that still somewhat fall into physics, but they can, bend the rules a little bit. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know this was a short stream, but hopefully this will give more people kind of a feel for how the game's going and the direction I'm taking it. Essentially what I'm trying to do here is make a game that I can continually add to it. Just like a game master or dungeon master that has a real role-playing game that plays tabletop with all the players. I want to make a community out of this. And eventually I want to get to the point where we have a forum and all kinds of things where people submit ideas, where they participate in this community, and we can, improve this, make it just an awesome game world with, lots of depth to it. And people play for years, like really vested in it, so that it's not just, some game, oh, I beat the game, now I'm done. No, this world will continue to evolve, for many, many years. So that's my vision, and that's where I'm going to take it. So thanks a lot, guys, John and Higher Ground Gaming, for participating in the chat a little bit there. I was hoping I'd get a few more people in here, but I just don't have enough followers, and plus I did this spontaneously, so that's what I get. But anyway, hopefully some people watch this after the fact and get some enjoyment out of it. And once again, if you ever have any ideas or questions or anything, make comments on the video, because the more I feel like people are interested in it, the more excited I get and the more motivated I am to get this done quicker and put more into it. So hope you guys have a good evening, and I'll be probably doing another live stream very soon. Not about this, it'll be playing an actual game, but this was just a little bit different for me at night. So once again, have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time.